All right, everybody. So I know people are on their way, digitally speaking, but if you'll give me 1 second just to find my place. I think we'll be ready to begin. Okay. So while people are getting virtually seated, I'd like to begin. So my name is Joyelle McSweeney, and as Director of Creative Writing here at Notre Dame, virtually speaking, it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's reading, Celebrating Magnificent Errors by Sheryl Luna. Magnificent Errors is the winner of the Sandine Prize for Poetry, selected by myself and my colleague, the poet Orlando Menes, and it's published by the University of Notre Dame Press, and you can get your copy now. I want to begin by acknowledging that the University of Notre Dame stands on the traditional homelands of Native peoples, including the Miami, Peoria, and Pokagum Potawatomi, who have been using this land for education for hundreds of years and of course continue to do so. I want to acknowledge also the world's refugee peoples tonight of all races, religions, and ethnicities. Those who are forced to migrate, those who choose to migrate, those who are facing war in their homes, and also those who feel unsafe or unwelcome in their states or homes of origin, right here in the United States. Those who have no choice but to stay, and those who are determined to stay. May all of these people find rest and some comfort tonight. It is a great pleasure and a true respite to be able to come into community with all of you here tonight and to celebrate this newest book, Magnificent Errors, which is the third by our guest, Sheryl Luna, an accomplished poet who has won residencies and recognition from Yaddo and Canto Mundo, whose first book inaugurated University of Notre Dame Press's Letras Latinas sponsored Andres Montoya Prize, and who in 2008 received the Alfredo Cisneros de Moral Foundation Award from Sandra Cisneros herself. And now, with Magnificent Errors, she can add the Sandine Prize for Poetry to this list of accolades. I wanted to find a brief excerpt from Luna's book to lead with tonight, but I found it difficult. First, because every poem in this manuscript contains dazzling turns and arrivals, executed with the seeming effortlessness, which is the mark of lyric excellence. And secondly, because it is difficult to cut into these poems. There's a sense of inevitability and suppleness and momentum to the thought and to the music that makes you want to leave it entirely intact and just admire it. I'll read you the beginning of the poem Forehead, for example, a poem dedicated to Andres Montoya. Forehead. I too am a romantic, despite it being uncool. I too have a scar. The line shocked me when I fell hard onto tile as a child. Hematoma, tumor, your forehead, a great wall of song. My scar, a third eye. Yours, a valley where eyebrows wept at its feet. And it just goes on like that with like beautiful turns, line after line. Keeps tugging you along the poem. Here each line rolls into the next and gathers strength as when water returns to an arroyo, power and sustenance in the same blow, ease and novelty, generosity and complexity, something that crests and something that goes on. The poems of Magnificent Errors are like that, grounded in a kind of experience that is both burdensome and non-negotiable, the burden of violation, and even the burden of intimacy itself. Luna's is a dark-hued but light-seamed world, a wisdom in progress, a coming to terms with the duality of beauty and pain, with the mystery of survival, its toughness, its tartness, and yes, its succulence. It's my pleasure to welcome to our virtual stage, Sheryl Luna.
All right, thank you so much, Joyelle. That was very kind. And I'd like to thank both you and Orlando for choosing the manuscript. It means a lot to me. I'm very grateful. And I'd like to thank the press, University of Notre Dame Press, as well as the English department for sponsoring this prize. It's greatly appreciated. Notre Dame has been good to me, so I have a fondness for Notre Dame. Um, uh, I'll go ahead and just start reading now. I have 7 poems marked, so let's see how that goes. Um, the first poem is called Lowering Your Standards for Food Stamps. Words fall out of my coat pocket, soak in bleach water. I touch everyone's dirty dollars. Maslow's got everything on me. 14 hours on my feet, no breaks, no smokes or lunch, blank-eyed movements, trash bag, coffee burner, fingers numb. I am hourly protestations and false smiles. The clock clicks its slowing, faces blur in a stream of hurried soccer games, sunlight, and church certainty. I have no point to carry, no material illusions. Cola spilled on hands, so sticky fingered. I'm far from poems. I'd write of politicians, refineries, and a border's barbed wire, but I am unlearning America's languages with a mop. In a summer hot red polyester top, I sell lotto tickets. Cars wait for gas, billowing black. Killing time has new meaning. A jackhammer breaks apart a life. The slow globe spirals, and at night, black space has me dizzy. Visionaries off their meds and whacked out meth heads sing to me. A panicky fear of robbery and humiliation drips with my sweat. Words, some say, are weeping twilight and sunrise. I am drawn to dramas, the couple arguing, the man head butting his wife in the parking lot. 911, no metered obit, and nobody but myself to blame. The second poem is after a poet here in Colorado named Martin Balgash, who he's a phenomenal poet. I greatly admire his work. The poet after Martin Balgash, he is an astronomer measuring the distance between light and loneliness, time and silence, the sound of his voice and the dreams of millions. There are constellations in his eyes, and orphaned poems fill his days. He holds his face in his palms every night. Universes wander inside him. He feels himself a black hole, space, the extraterrestrial other. The real mystery is love, and he deems the indifferent galaxies expanding forever into nothingness, a kind of perfect stillness. He calculates wishes and lost dreams, draws conclusions and arguments based on hunger and the empty stomach of humanity. The moon is an idea, and light shimmers on the rough water of himself, running into a sea gray with the polluted madness of want. He believes in firecrackers, the supernova of desire's fight against time, but he knows it's all a lie. There is the rumor of salvation. He wants to hold on to the last warmth of the sun, to believe his small yelp matters, that the Milky Way mourns his passing, burns stardust, while his hands are lit with a million years of truth. This poem it's a short one. I want to just tell you, I wrote this initially, drafted it in a workshop called Hard Times. I saw Michael Sindler here. He was a participant. Hard Times is a workshop that was started originally to help homeless people here in Denver, but it kind of expanded to anybody going through a hard time. And I just wanted to share that that's where I wrote a number of these poems in that particular workshop with fascinating poets and people. What I'd say if I had 15 minutes of fame. Gandhi's grandson throwing a too short pencil away, desiring a new freshly sharpened one. Gandhi making him find the old one in the dark, in the trash out back, telling him waste is violence done to the world. It's quite unpoetic. Modify your thoughts. Sit in the four corners of the earth. Watch open sky breathe its last. High in the hills, streams lit with the sun tell a story. Water rushing, sounding its ancient call. Your face warm in the light, bare feet cool. There's nothing perilous here in the West while we bomb the hell out of them. Yet each footprint, a light step kissing ground. Um, this one is about mental illness. A large number of the poems in the collection kind of address the difficulties and resiliencies of mental illness. So this is called Secret Missionary for the Virgin Mary off his meds. He writes of grenades, a universe exploding. It's inexhaustible, the sky. Something about badness turns him on. Passion, a candle with two wicks. He says to me, keep burning. He often falls out of love, handles language like a theologian, misses lilies. Lately, he insists fall's leaves aren't dead. His knowledge flickers brown bag like rows of luminaria candles at night. Seasonal affective, he deals with feminine questions. He argues without hearing his own voice. Within an occasional dream, he hears language glide along the starched collars of men. He will not let himself show sadness or joy. He forgets the late afternoon lake, golden, geese calling out in droves. No gangbanger. His past is a series of commitments, 74-hour holds, Haldol and Seroquel. Now, refusing meds, he's found the weather quite bothersome. Wringing his hands to a fallen image of God, he has a hurried urgency to be uninvolved. Like a man in solitary confinement in prison, tossing shit to the guards, he refuses to smile. Know-it-all criticisms of others make his days. He cannot let go atheism or disbelief. Electroshock therapy has him grasping at a forgotten past. He walks lanky towards a loneliness he won't refuse, and the aftermath of madness is calm. He tries to forget the dread of monotony and expectation. We, with the same steps, trod towards some understanding, some philosophy, all of us keepers of secrets. Um, This next poem is about a true occasion. I um, knew a man with schizophrenia, and he had a bicycle with no brakes, no brakes on the bicycle, and he erected a hang gliding sail with a pipe, and he took it to this small airport here in Broomfield, Colorado. So I just wanted to give you a little bit background on that. Um, the sailing bicycle. A Russian man sandpapers the bark of a dead tree, seeking to reawaken beauty. Later, homeless in rollerblades with walking sticks made of golf clubs, tennis balls for each base, his head half shaven, he asked, "Where has my wife fled?" Blaming her greed, he is a swarm of reflections. Sky huddles about him. Rims of clouds pink at twilight, trees darkening the frame. He's removed tile from his bathroom for odd reasons, and the landlord has kicked him out. He lit trees on fire, barbecuing, flames 8 feet tall. He erects a hang gliding sail on his bicycle with a plumbing pipe. Blue, it catches the wind. They call him schizophrenic. He'll have none of that. In bright yellow leafed madness, squirrels dart fitfully to half-eaten pumpkins. Clouds today, a gray crowd. Someone is weeping, but not Vladimir. He finds an airport runway. Cops tell him to please take apart his apparatus. Complying, he tells them America is about money's power. Okay, this one is also deals with mental health. Manic with depression. A manic man plants signs up and down traffic-filled streets, advocating world peace. Written on wedding paper, blowing down sidewalks like silver birds, the words disappear. Only sticks remain. Depressed, months later, he says, "I am the frown of my father. One dying squirrel drops from a tree, black eye blinking. Refusing to breathe yin yang, the man cannot forget his fear. Pigeons circle gray day. What's frozen inside, cracked anew. Needs rush through him. The golden day falls. Leaves skip along asphalt. Someone has tampered with my car radio again. My roommate moved my razor. He moved the body wash, just dropped it on the bathtub floor. Someone is out to get me from my past. Bad karma, bad, bad. Rage swells in his eyes when I disbelieve. His self hangs on like the last green of autumn. He dreams misaligned, then symmetrical, one intent, to live. The gray day trips over itself, counting pennies, and thin with need, he's fixated on karma. He has hidden his gay nature from himself for 50 years. Misery and a bad back needing touch have left him aware of his needs, but Christianity has him ashamed. He lives in the tick-tock of loss. Praying, he dreams forever, a burning sun, an infinite kingdom of saints. Okay, and this is the final poem in the collection. It's called The Transgression. And this will be the last one. We all unfold as music. Our desire appears each morning. It is white lit, bare branched hunger for the entire sky. Dark dogs bark at a man with a leaf blower. Doors open, close. My mind and yours lit by sun. Ravens caw, an unkindness tumults in the blue. We feel we learn our traumas too late, but we are as children. Our hearts some days an orchestra, suddenly aflame. Closing our eyes, we see our salmon lit dawn, and it is no transgression to look towards ourselves with awe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for the reading. It feels like such a real tonic tonight to just be in the presence of so much precision and so much vision. So everybody, for the next part of this event, Cheryl has agreed to a brief conversation with myself and my colleague, Orlando Menace, followed by questions from the audience. And so you can submit your questions in the chat and they will be moderated by our events fellow, Callie P. After this little conversation. So Orlando Menace is going to lead us off. Thank you, Orlando.
Thanks, Joelle. I want to start off with a topic that is rather broad for you to expand on. These poems depend a great deal on memory, not just personal, familial, but also the memory of being human. And what I'm interested in is, and I hope everyone else is interested in this, is the relationship between memory and imagination, as you understand it in your poems.
That's a good question. I think sometimes I use my imagination by blending things that I've imagined with actual things that I've observed in nature and society. And I kind of sometimes will blend the two. Like the one poem I read, about the mentally ill man that kind of had repressed emotions, I guess. It's based on several people that I've known. And then I have a cousin. This is kind of a tidbit, but his name is Joe Loya. He's actually a fiction writer, and he went to federal prison for 10 years for bank robbery. He robbed all these banks up and down Southern California, and he's told me the thing about the prisoners throwing feces at the guards in a federal prison. So I kind of like imagine that with the reality of people I've known, but they're not all autobiographical. Some are just observations. I think nature kind of, it can be played with too, with our imagination, with our internal and external landscapes. And so yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
I think that, let's see, my students often think that if a poem has an I, the poem has to be, strictly based on facts, And does a poem's truth have to depend on factual adherence to something that happened?
not at all. I don't think so at all. I think it's best reflected the way it was taught to me when I was an undergraduate a long time ago, is that it's about the human experience, what it means to be human. And you want to try to find some common ground with an audience, I feel, with our struggles and our triumphs as human beings. And I think everybody has a story. Everybody has a triumph. So, but yeah, definitely, I don't think using the first person necessarily indicates that it's a factual case.
Let me just add to that, that I was very aware of how your poems are a very close observation of human nature, very keen observation, not just, opinions or attitudes, but real observations. And yeah, I think that is one of the remarkable aspects of your poems in this book. And let me see. Let me just open it up to Joelle. Let's see where we go from here.
All right. So I also have a poet's question for you, and then a different question that's specifically about this book. But so my question is about beauty. And in a way, this kind of parallels what Orlando was just asking about memory and how we arrive at truth. So it seemed to me when I was reading a book, the speaker would have this observation about something just purely beautiful, and it would often be expressed very beautifully. But it would happen kind of at the limit of a much more painful kind of anecdote or vignette. And then suddenly the poet speaker kind of turns away and sees something like classically lyric and classically beautiful. And when I was reading it, I thought it was really interesting because it was as if beauty wasn't really a consolation. It was just there. It was just one more thing for the poet to like exquisitely experience, in the sense that exquisite can mean painful or it can mean wonderful. And so I just wondered if you had anything to say about arriving at lines like that in the book, whether it was just in the drafting or when you reread it. Like I just actually opened the book at random because my son just came and threw my copy on the floor. So opening it random, I see this passage. This is the poem Mud. So just starting halfway through, the eye sits at the periphery of loss. Stars at the edge of night form a roof over the southwest. I mean, just such a beautiful line that marks the kind of outer limit of the poem, and the poem kind of like rests its eyes on it for a minute. And yet to me, I didn't feel solace. I just felt like kind of another intensity. But that could be me as a reader. I just wonder what you think about those kind of lyric moments and those like super, super beautiful moments in your poems. And I say that in both senses, like they're beautiful, they're images that stand for and carry beauty, and then your treatment of them is so beautiful and lyric.
So I think for some poems like the one you mentioned, Mud, there isn't really a there's more of a recognition of our fragility and our humanness, that we're fragile, we're flawed, and that kind of ties into the title of the collection. So there's not always that salvation or that joy from healing, I guess, that comes through. Actually, and answering Orlando too, the memory, some of the things in the collection are true, dealing with my own mental health issues. And I think, sometimes you view nature as a thing of salvation, as a thing of beauty, and then sometimes it can represent something dark. It's like the yin and yang. We have the dark and the light together in our existence. Cutie pie.
Yeah, this is a very handsome man named Othello. So he says hi. And this is my exquisite 12-year-old Micah. So I really admired that, though, about the work, that like beauty can be in the world without solving all the poet's problems. And in some ways, it's another thing to be contemplated by the poem. Sorry.
May I add something to what you said, Joelle?
Please do. I'll be right back. I'm listening.
Yes.
I'm going to mute.
I wrote here that in connection to what Joelle observed, I found in these poems what I wrote, what I thought could be called a circumspect humanism. Like the poet realizes that grace that resolution can be found, but not necessarily that these are unpredictable. I'm reminded here of that really well wrought metaphor of the pecans at the end of the prayer, how the pecans can be really a metaphor for human beings, that they can rot, from the inside, no matter what you do for them, So that, I mean, that's tough. It's tough wisdom, Yeah.
So I do have another question, but I see that questions are popping up on the chat. So if it's okay with all involved, I'm going to ask Callie if you want to introduce some of those questions from the chat. And then if my question doesn't get asked, I'm going to have executive privilege and ask it later. Okay, thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Joyelle. Yeah, so it looks like one of our first questions that rolled in was, what's the difference between this book and Seven and Pity of the Drowned Horses in relationship to your growth in writing?
Wow. I think, well, they're very different books. When I wrote Pity the Drowned Horses, I was much younger. I still published late. I didn't publish till I was 40, but I dealt a lot with the border, the U.S.-Mexican border where I grew up, and I was fixated. I still can't get away from it. Just Ciudad Juarez has a lot of poverty. I grew up observing pretty wretched scenes of poverty, and when I left El Paso, I found that level of poverty didn't exist like that you see in a third world country, and so I was obsessed with that and my own coming of age. I think I had issues of my identity because of where I was raised and the way I was raised. So I think I was trying to find my identity with Pity the Drowned Horses. And I had a second book which kind of started to touch the issues of trauma and recovery, but it was a very hard book to write. And I think this third collection is more honest. It's more direct. Some of the poems are not as lyrical as others, but I think when you're dealing with trauma or issues of homelessness and such, the language kind of isn't as sonorous maybe as it would be in other poems. But I think I also learned a lot about community, excuse me, and like I said, I went to this workshop called the Hard Times Workshop, and I dealt with a lot of very real people dealing with serious difficulties, and that kind of woke me up and made me want to be more honest with my own poems.
Thank you so much for that answer. And I think it actually ties in really nicely with our next question, which mentions the characters that were described and centralized throughout Magnificent Heirs. And so the question along with that was, if you view poetry as a form of honoring or even immortalizing or simply humanizing those you have come to know and have impacted you deeply. And a follow-up question to that is if you believe that poetry serves the broader purpose of allowing us to examine and deepen those interpersonal relationships, both as writers and readers of poetry.
Yeah, I think so. I think kind of the realization that relationships are more important than most everything. The ability to love other people, the ability to love oneself, and those things are very pertinent. And I think poetry helps us have a dialogue with each other, in a weird way, I think poets kind of are in dialogue with each other all the time. And those relationships also matter. You can read something by someone who's been dead for years and years and still feel a connection to their work and what they're saying. So, and I don't know, I think one of the reasons I shared about various characters was to sort of show their strength and the beauty, despite having a mental illness or being homeless. There's some beauty and resiliency that does matter.
That's awesome. Another question that we had roll in was in regards to Salt Shaker. And one thing that was interesting was that the objectification of this poem, or objectification itself, seemed to be symbolic as well as the content of the poem. So the question with that was if that's kind of an accurate reading of that poem, and if, what was your process like in coming to write that piece specifically?
Well, I wrote that poem. Actually, that was a poem that I did write initially, drafted it anyways, in the Hard Times writing workshop. And
Cheryl, would you read it for those who don't have the book yet and don't know the poem? Would you consider reading that poem for us?
yeah, let me try to, here it is. Okay, I will.
And then we want to hear all about it.
Okay. Salt Shaker. I too have been shaken, spilled, crystallized, scattered. I have lived in a glass jar with a tin lid, the sounds of dinner talk muffled and echoing through my broken body. If you touch what is left of me, I am but a grainy texture, something to be sprinkled on something else. I am meant to add flavor, sass, to spice the world up, to give up my body for another and lend what's broken a healing balm. Snow-like, I fall over the world, molecular, dazzling, like forgiveness, like compassion. The whole of me, long lost in the space of what was Dead Sea, Indian Ocean, the march of one man refusing violence against the earth. Half naked in sandals, Gandhi walked the salt march, each footprint a light step kissing the ground.
I'm not the person who asked this question, so I definitely want to hear what you have to say about your method and about the kind of personification, objectification dyad there. But I just want to say I loved the bit about the snow that falls. That was the amazing opening up of scale there. It was really wonderful for me.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think it was maybe a little bit about progress. Someone asked about my first book. I think I was very ambitious when I was younger. I wanted to do something, to be successful, so on, so on. And I think as I got older, I realized that doesn't matter. The ego can be detrimental, and so I have a hard time letting go of my ego, and so a lot of the poems are about that struggle. So I guess I did objectify myself, but trying to lose the ego, trying to not be so involved with the self is a great difficulty, but it's something to strive for.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that answer. I'm lucky enough that I don't have to type my question into the chat, so I can just kind of throw it at you. I was so curious by the epigraph that opens the book, the Pablo Picasso quote. And for those of you who don't have Magnificent Errors yet, it reads, "The purpose of art is washing the dust of daily life off our souls." I loved that opening for this collection because I felt like these poems like innately were not brushing dust off. I felt like they were kind of examining the dust of daily life and coming to grips with that to view something that is greater. So I was just wondering, I guess I don't really have like an exact question, but if you might speak kind of on that connection, or if you're seeing tensions there or whatnot.
Well, I think Neruda said something about common things, and that the common, by looking at the common and the specific very carefully, we look at the larger picture. It kind of magnifies the smaller you go, sometimes the bigger it extends. I don't know, does that
Yeah. Callie, do you want to say anything? Does that make sense to you, Callie?
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. Thank you so much. I was going to say, Joelle, this might be a great time for you to ask that question you had, if you still have it, or if it was answered.
Yeah. So just, I mean, I don't feel I felt like that was such a beautiful place to end. I'm happy to end it there, because the questions I had were about writing in community and all kinds of things that you touched on so gorgeously. And it was just really a pleasure to spend time with this book, getting ready for tonight, and to hear you read tonight. So thank you so much for your time tonight, Sheryl, and congratulations on the Sandine Prize for Poetry.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you,
And
Sheryl.
I definitely want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you to Kelly Huth and to Callie Peed for making sure the Zoom worked. Thank you, Orlando, for joining us in the conversation. And I want to remind everyone that you can order Magnificent Errors directly from the University of Notre Dame Press. The link is in the chat. You can order it from bookshop.org, and those would be the two best places to order it, I think. If it's at bookshop.org, take a look. But anyway, University of Notre Dame Press. And I hope that everyone will join us for more readings this semester, because they include readings by our MFA community, the Sparks Prize winner Yasmin Ortiz, and poets Adrian Matejka, Ann Carson, and Ray Armentrout, and all that is waiting for you after spring break. So go away, come back, and then come back and hear some poetry. Good night, everybody.